Before we begin, thank you very much to Rachel the Transformer for joining the Patreon campaign. Wow, actual Transformers joining. Wow. You'd think that would happen more often. Thank you very much. Always appreciate it. I don't want to spend too much time gushing over how generous you guys are and how much you guys ensure that this channel can keep going, that I'm able to keep doing it. Instead, because we have a lot to get through. So I decided that I was going to tackle something that we have not done in quite a bit. We're actually going to be looking at the last run of Generation 1 Transformers today, the Action Masters, because I wanted to get kind of a clear list of who has gotten new figures and who has not, because it is very untapped still, and a lot of the figures that have come out for these original Action Master characters have been kind of weird. And honestly, we kind of need another go-around on some of these. So, I've just compiled a list, and for the record, we are not concerned with most of the Action Masters on screen right now. That's just a splash image to start the video. Obviously, Megatron, Soundwave, even Devastator have modern figures, but look at Croc there. Look at Croc just kind of like sitting on the front of the tank. He's had a couple. They are both weird. But it is worth checking in. I want to go through all this, and not only are we going to look at the ones who have had modern figures, we're going to take a look at all the original Action Master only characters who still have not gotten an update, and in my opinion, what mold and style they should have. Because let's be honest, one thing about Action Masters, they're not going to get new molds. There's no Action Master popular enough that's going to get a mold that is 100% completely new to him. With one super weird exception, but we'll get to that. So for starters, we look at some of the ones who, obviously have been taken care of. Jackpot here, of course, does have a modern figure, even has his Action Master partner. They retooled that from 86 Jazz, and it's a popular one to redo into Action Masters because a lot of Action Masters had that very obvious car becomes the like the front of car becomes chest kind of robot mode going on. So this is pretty typical. Jazz gets used a few times. For instance, we also have Kickoff here, who not a terribly different deco from Jackpot, honestly. You switch out the yellow for orange, and it's mostly kind of in the same tones. So no real surprise that this one also became a Jazz mold. This one becoming the reveal the Shield Jazz, which is still a fantastic figure. So anytime you get to use that toy again, by all means, have at it. So that is a great mold to use. Slicer from the Euro Action Masters, obviously because he is just, basically the only thing you can straight up repaint Wheeljack into. He has gotten a few toys in the modern age. Bakan took care of him once upon a time in 2010. And yeah, I mean, using Downshift, who was designed to look like Wheeljack, pretty obvious choice and pretty good. Somewhere in an old phone somewhere, I have a photo of two of these combined. It's like the most expensive Energon power link ever. We also have, of course, his modern version, which is the modern Wheeljack toy. I wish this one replicated the deco of the original figure a little bit better, but it's not bad. It's still very obviously Slicer. So Slicer's well taken care of. We don't have to worry about him. As long as Wheeljack toys are being made, we'll still get Slicers at some point. Like I said, Croc is a weird one. The name is Croc based on his partner figure. However, the details on him do not lend themselves to a beast mode. He obviously has some kind of canopy, a smaller canopy like you'd see on a Stealth Bomber. So FunPub took advantage of this too. They used the Stealth Bomber Megatron to create their own Croc, who, if you actually follow those details on the chest, actually does pan out pretty well. Some of the color placement is off, unfortunately, especially like in the biceps and a little bit in the legs, but it's a pretty close approximation to what he would have been. And then there's the retail Croc, who definitely has some color arrangement issues compared to how his Action Master looked, but as a repaint of Skull Cruncher, it was pretty obvious. pretty obvious to do, and it works. It works well enough. I mean, obviously, it's not the original intention of the design for Croc, but when your name is Croc, I mean, I guess that's pretty much what you are stuck with. So no real surprise there. Let's take a look at Axer. So Axer is another one with the bumper on the chest, the headlights. So obviously he was going to be some kind of car, and FunPub took care of this one as well. FunPub went to Action Masters quite a bit, you will find. Because yeah, it's obscure stuff that hadn't had toys yet, and a lot of these, as you can see, still have not had retail release toys. You know, there is no such thing as like a retail Axer figure, even though we have car Transformers all the time. FunPub decided to use the Revenge of the Fallen version of Lockdown in order to create this toy, which honestly doesn't seem to fit very well. I don't know, this one just kind of seems forced in. I'm not a fan of it. But, you know, it gets the character out at least, I guess. But, man, like, I really would have preferred something that looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit closer to how the original looked. Oh, but they weren't done. If you want this mold again, but you feel the blue and the gray is a little bit too drab, don't worry, because there's Action Master Circuit to think about. And Circuit is a repaint of the Axer mold, so it's no surprise that they actually did the exact same thing with Bakon and came up with this Technicolor travesty. It's weird. He looks like his vehicle mode looks like he's like swirled ice cream or something. I'm not huge on how he looks in the vehicle mode or the robot mode, really. It's a little bit too flashy and garish. Now, don't get me wrong. I like the Euro Action Master stuff that's like blindingly, brilliant. I almost wanted to put Action Master Thundercracker on here because he's so different from G1, but let's be honest, he's had a modern toy and we pretty much know the game with him. But this is kind of in a similar style, and I think what's ruining it for me is the fact that it's movie aesthetic and the bright, super bright colors just do not work on movie aesthetic. It's super weird. It's just super weird. I much prefer something on like a much more solid looking character, not skeletal or spiky like this. All right, let's move on. Gut Cruncher. Now, the head design immediately kind of gives you Wheeljack vibes because it's got a similar kind of pattern to the mouth. It's got like ear extensions or look like little cannons, but otherwise, like kind of. But he's obviously a tank. He's got treads in the back of his legs. He does have one modern figure. I say modern. He's got one figure, since his original. But it wasn't called Gut Cruncher. It was called Spark Crusher. And it was a redeco of the Legends class Warpath toy at the time. Something else that's common in this is that this is not the only time Warpath would be redecoed into a Action Master. It's kind of weird because it's about the only time he does get redecoed. But it works. It works. It's a tank. The head can work and be modified enough with paint alone to look like Gut Cruncher. So this is one I'm actually surprised. I'm actually like really shocked that more Warpath toys have not been redone this way. Seems like an obvious one to go to. Another modern one. This one is modern. This one is actually pretty recent. Mainframe, who is very nondescript. He is very plain in how his robot mode looks. He looks like a very generic Sunbow-esque background character design. But we do realize, okay, Mainframe tells us he's a computer. Like, he'll transform into a computer. Now, in modern times, I would say your best bet would be to retool a Perceptor. Because, otherwise it gets a little bit funky. But we do have a modern Mainframe toy that came with the Arc. It does not have his classic colors because he transforms into Teletran 1, which does make a whole lot of sense. But it does leave us wanting for this to actually come out in its proper colors. That's what Generation Selects is for. As long as this mold is completely separate from the Arc tooling itself, there is a possibility of that actually happening. Kingdom isn't that old. The mold should still be viable. It's just a matter of if. But I know there's people who want it. And it is kind of weird to have a Mainframe, but it's so weirdly colored. Another one from Europe, Double Punch, who obviously just a tiny little black Zarak in super vibrant colors. Again, we have to go to BotCon in order to get this one in modern, and they use the Energon Scorponok mold, which makes a lot of sense. The toy was also used for a dark or like a black Zarak homage, so obviously, this kind of works in. I do wish the patterns on the colors, they came as close as they could. But it's still the right combination of garish. So we're going to accept this. It's not a bad job at all. An interesting one to redo is Tread Shot, and that is because he is based on one of the previous gun transformers that almost became G1 Megatron. He is the Magnum Robo from Microman. You can see the revolver barrel in his gut right there. But again, he has a cannon in his chest, which means obviously he's going to be redecoed into a Warpath toy. Specifically, this is, I believe, the Generations one. I love this toy, by the way. This is still a fantastic toy. So he gets taken care of in a very obvious way. And again, I don't really think that's a bad take. If you want to redo Warpath into Tread Shot, that kind of works. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. And then we get to a curious case of Bonsai-tron, and for whatever reason, Bonsai-tron is just very, very well taken care of. He is a de facto repaint for any Bludgeon toy that comes out, so don't be surprised if the new Legacy Bludgeon doesn't get repainted like this for Generation Selects at some point. It was the Revenge of the Fallen Bludgeon. Do you want a car? Do you want a car Bonsai-tron? Because he was that in Alternity. You think Alternity is such a short-lived line, but it had a Bonsai-tron. Figure that one out. Fun Pub Handling You Too. They did a Bonsai-tron. He's a boat. It's done from Energon Mirage. So he can be just about any vehicle mode you want because his original toy does not really lend itself to any particular vehicle. Oh, we can also just, make a brand new one. Super 7 just made a brand new one for the Ultimates line. You wonder why the Ultimates line died out when they didn't want to do a normal Starscream, but they did want to do a Bonsai-tron. I don't know. Super weird toy line. But that's who's gotten taken care of in modern Transformers. Those are all the Action Masters who have had updates. Let's take a look at some of the ones who don't, starting with Skyfall here. And originally, I look at those shoulder pylons and I think to myself, that is very much Seeker leaning. But I look at the head sculpt. This name itself, the convention, he's going to be a jet. He looks like he would be right in line with one of the Skyquake retools. Everyone kind of wants things they want G1 Skyquake out of the mold, and it's kind of designed to work with that design as well. And then you get Machine War Starscream too. If you get to that kind of head sculpt that's more accurate to that design, it would work really well for Skyfall too. I don't know if you can get anyone to buy a leader class Action Master, but the possibility's there. We can take a look at Rad, and Rad is kind of quirky. So he's very sleek. Originally, I thought futuristic car, but the details on the front of him don't really look like headlights, and they don't really look like a bumper. And then you see the engine block in his belly, and you kind of think, oh, he's a motorcycle. Okay, that makes it a whole lot easier. We can keep that slick round nature by making him a Legacy Prowl retool. Seems to work, keeps the round shapes intact. The color layout, I think, could work on the figure. Yeah, it seems to be an obvious one. To me. Let's get to one that's weird. Let's get to one that's actually challenging, and that would be Takeoff. Takeoff is difficult because his name would imply that he's some kind of jet. Unfortunately, and he does have turbines in his belly. Unfortunately, he also has wheels for his shoulders and wheels in his legs, meaning he'd have to be some kind of car, but his name is Takeoff. Okay, so how do you parse that one? Well, we have to get creative. So it's got to be a car, but it's got to have rocket engines, and that kind of just leads you to really weird cars like this, which are designed to set land speed records. So rocket cars are a thing. So he'd have to be some kind of rocket car, but what mold do you actually use? There's no such thing as a dragster transformer outside of a Minicon. So what do? You retool it from a jet. You could actually retool it from Cyclonus, and I think you would actually get something of this similar vibe. You know, maybe not the engine on top. He'd probably be dual engine. But the fact is, like, that might actually work. That might, it definitely have to be from a jet, though. You just add, just figure out where to add the engines and the wheels, and you're good to go. Sprocket is another one. There's a lot in here that actually kind of lend themselves to helicopters of some type, and Sprocket's one of them. Which also is going to go double for Rumbler, the repaint. So we have to figure out something that works for both of them. And I kind of look at where the cockpit is on the belly. I look at the overall shape. And what it puts me in the mind of is actually Earthspark Megatron. Like, that seems to be the fit for the mold. Now, unfortunately, this one is a little bit weird since it's in one of the kids' lines. It's a deluxe, but it's a lower budget deluxe than what collectors are used to. So redoing this mold might not go over too well. But if this design or any kind of VTOL transformer comes out at deluxe or Voyager size, that's where I think you pencil in Sprocket and Rumbler. And I feel like with a name like Rumbler, it's got to be a heavier version of a helicopter, and a VTOL like a twin propeller one seems to do the job there. Let's take a look at Charger. And Charger is a little bit tricky because he comes across like a little bit of a futuristic, like sharp-edged race car. And originally I was going to do, Point Blank? But no one likes that mold, and the overall design doesn't quite fit him. I think the car mode would work, but that's about it. So you have to get creative on some of these, right? So I thought to myself, okay, maybe Sunstreaker, but no. I had an epiphany. You know who it needs to be? It needs to be Corden. It needs to be the Sunstreaker remold with a light bar on top, so the light bar can replace the headlights on the chest. So it'd be a yellow light bar with a green vehicle mode, and the color scheme, if you look at Sunstreaker, it can mostly work. You can get most of that layout from that character. Also, you're going to get not only the chest to work thanks to light bar, you're also going to get these tall shoulders that also work for Charger as well. So, a little bit of creative thought on this one, but it actually would work. I think it actually would work. Here's another one that's fun, Rollout, who you'd think they do more toys of just to get the trademark on the catchphrase. He's obviously a construction vehicle, which means he's very limited in what we can choose. And because he has a bucket scoop in the front of his chest, that basically means he has to be a Bone Crusher repaint. The trick is actually getting a Bone Crusher who is separate from a combiner team, or getting one that isn't isn't gang molded to the other Constructicons. This one would be very, very difficult to do. This one very much approaching, he might just have to be his own mold, but that's not what the challenge is. I don't know. It's as close as we can come. And as long as the two are that close, it's kind of hard to parse them into two individual figures, I think. How about Overrun? And this is where we start getting into more dependency on helicopter designs. Again, if we're going to go with this, the name Overrun, I don't really like for a helicopter, which is one difficulty. This is going to be a weird one, but I want it to be some kind of Springer, because I think the name Overrun can work better with the vehicle mode, but it still retains the helicopter mode as well. Granted, you're going to have to do a lot of work on that chest to make sure it kind of has a similar look, but it could be done. Okay, a bit of a stretch, but you're not going to get a clean conversion out of all of these. How about Power Flash, which is another case, seemingly another case for a helicopter. Maybe you could have gotten a submarine out of this too, but I think helicopter is about what we're going for here. I would go jet, but it doesn't seem to have any semblance of a wing. But I look at the overall shape here. This reminded me of an older figure, and it's probably not going to be viable to use anymore, but something similar in design, potentially in the future. Dark of the Moon Tomahawk has the intakes in the right spot, has the canopies and the nose cone in the right spot. Once upon a time, this would have been a perfect use. I think you even could have gotten away with just repainting the head instead of retooling it. Lost opportunity. But it had to be something similar to like this. So maybe if they do a new Armada Cyclonus, we could see a Power Flash redone out of that. Until then, they would have to like be willing to dig up some pretty old molds in order to actually get that character out. And now we get to the hardest run of all of them, and that is the other Action Master elites, starting with Turbo Master, the Lavender Bruticus, who is the weirdest of helicopters you have ever seen. It's got really weird placement for the rear of the vehicle. It's got some form of helicopters on pointed up from its arms, and wings too. VTOL's not enough; it needs wings as well. So what do you do? And this is brilliant. I think this is the most brilliant choice I have in this entire list. You know what you use? You use broadside. Look at the jet mode. Look at the jet mode. That is windmill. That is 100% windmill. Oh my god, it would work. It would absolutely work. You could even put the original VTOLs still in, like, because those are just his arms. Like, you like rotate the arms so the elbows can like point his forearms up. You like retool it so he could put a couple of propellers on the top. That'd be it. That'd be it. There's your windmill. There is absolutely your windmill. It would work so much. I think you could even get away with keeping the head. Even the head is kind of Bruticus looking. Oh, I love it. I love it. Here's a hard one. Here's a really hard one, and that's Omega Supreme. And your first thought is, well, just do an Omega Supreme repaint. Number one, they're never painting a Titan into something like this. Not for any reason. No way, no how. So you need to come up with something else. Here's what I see. I see a very vertical tank. I see a very vertical tank that has to use, it has to be two-armed in how it works. This one would take a ton of remolding. This one might be one of those, like the internal structure is the same, but all the outward parts are reused. And here's your left field choice of this one. How about the new Megatron? You know why we use the new Megatron? Well, take a look at the tank mode. The tank mode is actually pretty similar. It's very high up. It's very high up, which gets you the right proportions. What gets to me the most is the fact that his arms make up the turret of the tank, which is true of Omega Supreme. So if you actually adapt this, see those pegs on the front? There's 5mm pegs and then 3mm pegs on the front. If you have like 5mm weapons that can plug onto there, all of a sudden this thing looks a whole lot more like Omega Supreme. You take, you just remold him so he has twin cannons hanging off of there instead of the central cannon. And that's where you get your silhouette for the vehicle mode. And then everything else kind of adapts from the robot mode, So because keep in mind, if you do Omega Supreme into those colors, it's not going to transform the same way. It's not going to have the right vehicle mode. And even the robot mode is not going to have the right components because Omega Supreme has actual hands. So just keep those things in mind. Really, Omega Supreme is just the head. It's just the head that makes it look like Omega Supreme. So there's the suggestion. There's other big tanks like this that you could use, but the fact that the arms are the turrets, just like that sells it to me. Because that gets it really close to the original Supreme. And then we have the hardest one of all. What do you do with Windmill? What do you do with this asymmetrical boy? Because you gotta assume it's a helicopter with just this massive weapon slung to the bottom. This one really I don't think is possible. I really do not think is possible. At the absolute most, I'm kind of like looking at the Legacy Sandstorm listing that's in the computers, thinking like, you're probably the only shot. You're probably the only shot, and man, you wouldn't fit at all, but you're about as close as we'd ever get. But there's your rundown. There's all of the Action Master exclusive characters and their modern takes, or what their modern takes should be. So, long-winded video about a really weird topic, so I hope someone out there got some amusement out of this. Thank you very much for watching. I need to go rest my voice. But, as always, I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You think a werecroc is going
to listen to elvish rules of piracy.
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.